In today's video, I'll show you how to make house slippers, beautiful, soft and cozy house slippers with the loops and threads Sweet Snuggle polyester yarn, which is only 87 yards, and you probably have some left over after you finish, using the zigzag stitch on a loom. So you're gonna need your loom and the yarn. It's kind of chunky. It's jumbo 7. The weight of the yarn is 7. So let's start. I'm gonna be doing this for size 9.5, 10 in US size house slippers. I have to mention the yarn is very soft and it's gonna make some very cozy and good slippers, but I found out that it's a little bit loose and it can start to unravel around the edges. So if you want to keep it in place, I do recommend to have like one little knot at the end before you start working on your project. So you won't be having this like little furry stuff falling off. So to begin, you have to tie a little bit of like a simple knot on your anchor peg, which is the one that is on the side of the loom. Just one time to keep it in place for the first couple of rows, and then you can unravel the knot. And to begin, to cast on, we'll be using chain cast on. You need to have 10 stitches. So we start making the chain cast on until we reach the 10th peg. And you tie along the way each of the stitch, not too much, so you can be able to flip every new stitch on the next row. My hook is a little small for this thickness of yarn, but it will still go through. And for the 10th peg, you'll need to just put the last stitch on the 10th peg. So after you put your last stitch on the last peg, you flip over and you start with a zigzag. If you wish, you can do a little ear-wrap around this peg and then start with a zigzag, but the way I will do it for this video, I'll just start from the bottom peg like this and This will be my first row of zigzag. As you noticed, we did only 10 stitches on one side, but on the second row we started with the zigzag, and that's okay. I just wanted to have some clear edges for the slippers. So in this case we're gonna flip only the side that has already 2 stitches on each back. The opposite side we're gonna start flipping on the next row. And that's row 1, row 2 on this side, and row 1 on the opposite side. So from here I'm gonna continue zigzagging until we reach 20 rows. So 10 pegs, 10 stitches is how wide my project will be, and then 20 rows how long. And then I continue with the same wrapping for the zigzag stitch on the next row. So to keep my yarn in place, I'll just flip the last stitch and push it down, and this will hold everything else in place. But keep in place on mind that the yarn is very soft and slippery, so you may have to assist a little bit prior to flipping each stitch with your fingers so they won't be loose. And when you're wrapping the yarn, try to make it not too loose and not too tight so you won't be able to flip each stitch over. And from this row we're gonna be flipping both sides until we reach the 20 rows and the end of the project. So at this point I have about 14 rows, and I'll be doing additional 6 rows before I finish the project. This is how it looks so far. I like the colors of this yarn. It says bluebell stripe, which changes from white to blue to kind of like bluish gray, something like that. So obviously my slipper is gonna be with 2 different colors, 3 different colors, but that's okay. It's the way I'm doing it. It's feeling like some fancy memory foam, I guess. Very velvety feel, very soft. If you decide to try it, and if you use this yarn, I think you'll be happy with the project too. So I'll continue wrapping from here for another 6 rows, and then I'll show you how to finish the project. So I have one last row that I need to wrap, and then we're gonna finish the project. So I'm on the 19th row, and how do you count the rows? Each row have this like V-shaped stitch. I'll try to trace it with the hook. So that's one row and one stitch. So you start from the bottom and you see all of this like V-shaped things, and you count until you reach 20. Or you can measure, if you're making the same size, you need to have 9.5 inches long panel by 8 3/4 inches wide, which is 24 centimeters long by 22.5 wide. So I'm gonna start wrapping the last row, and then we're gonna finish the project. Obviously, if you have to change the size according to your preferences, you have to do the math, and this may vary if you use different yarn or different size gauging in the looms. So if you don't like this yarn, there is an option, if you have yarn weight 4, to double the thread and make it work still with this loom, but it's your choice. In 10 stitches per row and 20 rows, you already have the measurements, and you have to do the math of what you would like to do for yourself if you have a different size shoe size. It's very stretchy, so this can definitely fit different sizes, but still you have to adjust for different size shoes. So this is my last row, and to make sure you have two exactly the same panels that you're gonna work with, you can just put one on top of the other and check prior to finishing. I also want to show you the clear edge when I use the chain cast on. It's kind of clean and very beautiful. And for this video I made another I made the second panel with the different cast on, so you can see the difference. So this is with the ear wrap cast on. Obviously you can see it's kind of like a double, but for the ear wrap cast on, I did wrap 10 packs on each side of my loom. So this is how it looks like if it's the ear wrap, and this is how it looks with the chain cast on. Obviously you can see it's different, but when I saw it on the slipper, it's not gonna be that different after all. Another difference between this and this cast on is that the ear wrap, it's a little bit more stretchy and more loose, but you can definitely fix that by pulling up the string a little bit and making it tighter. from the beginning to the end for clear edges. So how do we finish the project at this point? We needed 20 rows on 10 pegs. At this point I will be flipping the stitch from the back side to the front where my yarn is. On top of the other stitch on the opposite side. So it's kind of like putting both sides together. I take the stitch from this side, bring it to the opposite side and put it on the peg. Same for all the rest of the stitches until you get 2 stitches on each peg on one side of the loom. So all of my 10 stitches from one side were flipped on the opposite side, and I will flip over the bottom stitch to the top one for all of the 10 stitches until I have only 1 stitch left on each peg. And that's the last stitch. Now I would need to get a needle, and I'll cut the yarn as this yarn have this little white string in the middle. I'm gonna connect the end of my white thread to this yarn, and I'll tie a knot. As close as I can to the stitches. I chose to use a thinner thread because the yarn is already chunky, and though the slippers are nice and soft, I would prefer the edges to be not very thick, which is the reason to pick just the regular sewing thread. And I can cut this now. So, and this is the back of my slipper. I will put the knot through the back hole. We'll find the stitch. The last stitch is here, and I will do one loop through the stitch, so this goes inside as much as possible, and it's hidden on that side. The knot is here on the inside, and I'll match both sides. And we'll start sewing until I reach the bottom of the sew. as I'm using this very thin thread compared to the yarn that I used, you can see it's pretty much almost invisible where the edge is. And I really like that. And that's on the inside of the slipper. And we'll continue sewing until I can reach the end, and then I'll make a knot. So I already finished. Both of the parts are connected together. And this is how it looks like on the opposite side. So here I'll tie it a few times and just make a knot. The way I do it, after I make the last loop, I go through the loop with the needle, the tied ones. And maybe one or two more times. And then I would just tie a knot with the last loop, which I'm holding with my finger, and the other side of the thread. I'll tie like 2 or 3 times just to make sure everything stays in place. Double tying. So this will be the back of my slipper. And now I have to connect on the inside the front of the slipper. Same thing like before, just this side I tied it so it's a little bit like shorter than the other side, about half. Let me see when I tied. And we'll just take off each of the stitch from the pegs with my needle. We'll get ready to finish the project. And the whole panel is off of my loom. Here's how it looks like. I'm going to pull the string just a little bit to tie this side. Like this. This would be the front of my slipper, but I would like to have it a little tighter. So we'll keep pulling for a while until I get the desired shape, kind of like this. And now I can connect this thread to a regular sewing thread so I can finish sewing this slipper. I'll be using just white thread for sewing, and I'll show you how to sew the slipper. So on the front currently, the hole is about 2.5 inches in the middle, and this should be fine, so I can start sewing on that. Again, I'll connect this thread to my sewing thread, and after I tie a knot, I cut the thread which I use for loom knitting, as well as the extra thread. And I'll be sewing the front part of the slipper now. Again, I'll flip a few times back and forth until I'm able to hide this knot in place that I want it to be, or just sew it in place. A few times so it won't unravel eventually. Just to make sure that the yarn is completely secured. I found this one skein of yarn at Michael's in their clearance section, so I believe it was about $5, which is the reason I'm using this. But you can use Bernard yarn or any other fluffy yarn, kind of like chunky yarn that you like. So I will close this hole, and then I will go here and I will sew a little bit more here. So this is the first pair of slippers that I made. At this point, if I'm going to leave them like this, I would usually make a pom-pom or a flower or just some small decoration that I can attach to the front. But I'll have a second pair of slippers that I'm gonna show in this video, so I'll continue the work for the second one. That's how they look. I must say the yarn is very soft and comfy, but if you have wooden floors or laminate in your home, you would need to get some of those rubbery dots like sock stop, or the fabric with the rubbery dots, the non-skid fabrics, so you can attach to the sew. So this is the part where I'm going to show you the second kind of slippers, because I have already used 2/3 of the yarn and have only like 1/3 left, or maybe a little more. And this skein of yarn was only 87 yards, which turned out to be very economical the way I did it. So if you like to try, keep in mind the carpet floors will be perfect. You will not have issues with that, but wooden floors or laminate could be a little bit slippery. So for this part of the video, I will get my bigger loom that it's more like for blankets. And I will still be using the same stitch, zigzag stitch, but this time instead of 10 stitches, which is 5 on each side, we're gonna have total of 15 stitches, and we're gonna start again the same thing, ear wrap for the first 15 packs, and then we're gonna wrap both sides, and this side will have one extra row compared to this side. I would like to say, if you have thinner or smaller feet, you will definitely have to consider using only like 6 to 8 stitches and less rows in order to make that. So again, I'll start with a slip knot. And just do ear wraps around all of the 15 packs. For the cast on only. So you just wrap all of them. And continue by wrapping again one more time the last pack and switching the way you're wrapping from right to left when you go on the second row, from right to left, right to left, until you reach the first pack that we just started with. So the current loom that I use have 62 packs, but I use only 15 out of the whole thing. So if you're wondering how big is that, because I can't really show the whole thing right now, it's a total of 62, but we're gonna be using only this side of the loom. After I flip all of my ear wraps for the cast on, I'll continue with the next row as I'm using zigzag stitch. So here's the second row. Again, I will be flipping on this side, this row, but the next side I'll leave it for the next wrapping of the zigzag. And that's the first, or should I say the second row, with the first zigzag. Now I will flip all of the stitches and I'll continue with the next row, and I'll let you know how many rows I'll do before we finish the project. So this would be the second row on the back side. For this stitch, I will do one ear wrap around the first pack on the back only, and I'll flip it This would be only for this row and only the first stitch, so I can start zigzagging in the opposite direction. So here is how we're gonna do this row. After we just finished the ear wrap on this stitch only, I'll start doing again the wrapping about the zigzag. And that's how I'm gonna continue doing the zigzag stitch for about maybe 4 or 5 more rows. Flipping over the last one so my yarn stays in place and it's not gonna get loose. And again, flip over each of the stitches until we're ready on both sides. So again, I'm gonna flip my loom this way and do the next row zigzagging. And this is row number 3 that I'm doing. So after my last row is done, I will again flip all of the stitches on one side, and out of each stitch I will make one by taking the bottom one and flipping it over. You can use your fingers to help a little bit with the moving of the stitches on the opposite side. And all my stitches are on this side right now, so I'll start flipping over the bottom stitch on top of the other until I reach the end of the row. And just flip it over. If you like me and like some of those like cartoon slippers or winter slippers in the shape of dinosaur feet, I believe that you're gonna love this project, so stay tuned until the rest of the video so you can see how it's gonna look like. So this is my last row, the 8th row. Now I'm gonna cut the thread and again sew with the needle through all of the stitches before I pull this off of my loom. And here I take each of the stitch off the back with my needle again like the previous part by sticking my needle through this tiny line over here and taking it through the top of the stitch. Or just pull a little bit with your finger so the needle can easily go through the stitch. So here are the next two panels that I just finished on the bigger loom. They're 15.5 inches long by 3.5 inches wide, each of them. I would like to show you how the edges look when you use the ear-up cast on. They're pretty good and neat if you use only one side of the loom. Also, you would have to check for your leg how big that hole should be. 2 to 2.5 inches of sewing here was good for me because I plan to make boots out of this, house boots. But if you like them to be tighter or looser, you have to adjust how much you would close from this side of the slipper by sewing. So I'm gonna fold this and show you how I will attach this to the slipper. So this is where I finished my last row with the needle, and this is the ear-up cast on, and I'm gonna need this much, which the hole is about 5 inches, to attach the top of my boat. So I want them to be overlapping a little bit, because I would put a little bit of a decoration here, a button or a small flower, or maybe a pom-pom on this kind of the slipper. I think button, 1 or 2 buttons will work great for each of the slippers. So now I will connect this part to the bottom of this panel, and I will sew also this bottom part of the slipper. The top will be held by a button. So again, I'm using some just regular sewing thread, like for sewing machine. And I'll start with this. I have exactly 2 inches of overlapping. So I'll start by sewing here. And I'll flip my slipper. So I'll be sewing on the inside now. And again, I'll go all the way to close this part of the slipper, so it matches the hole on the slipper that it's already finished. And the top will be open because I will probably use a button for this. So I just finished closing this part of the slipper, and I just continued a few more stitches until I reach the end, because I want this overlapping part to be on the side of the slipper. So from here I start to connect the top and the bottom to attach both sides together until I sew the whole top part of the boat. So here is how the finished boat looks like. As I said, I sew on the bottom and I left this part open. If you like to make this for a man and don't like any decorations on it, you can just sew here and close the whole thing, or you can make the top part 3 stitches less and just make one whole part without overlapping. If you're making it for a child and want a little bit more flexibility around this part, you can just sew over here a piece of elastic on the inside so it's a little bit stretchy. But I still have yarn left even after I made the 2 extra parts, or I'll use a button. As it turns out, this method of making the slippers is very economical, because last time I checked, making socks requires about 125 yards of yarn if you use a chunky yarn. So my whole skein of yarn was 87, and it's way less than manufacturer recommendations. So I think this is still a very good project to try, and we'll show you the finished project and the decorations in a little bit. So here is the second kind of slippers that I made, my boats. So all the parts are connected together, and I decided that I will connect also this part. So here are both of my slippers, and the last thing I'll be adding to them is this big button. I'll completely close this, sew it, and I'll put the button here. And that would be it. I'll show you the finished product in a few minutes when I finish sewing it on the inside. And here are my boat slippers. Here's the button and how they look like on the side. And that's the other one. Thank you for watching. If you like to support my channel, please like, subscribe, or comment. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.